It's time for another Suburban video. We're going to do the rear lift today. So we got the front lift done and got 2.5 inches out of the torsion keys. Now the front sits about 1 inch higher than the rear, and went and got it aligned after that to get the camber and everything fixed. So in the rear, we're going to do heavy duty springs, and we're also going to do lift shocks all the way around. So these shocks are good for 1.5 inches to 3 inches of lift, and I'll put the part numbers in the description. The springs that we're going to use are Moog heavy duty springs, and they should raise the truck 2 to 3 inches in the rear. The amount of lift that we get is pretty much going to come down to how worn out these springs are. This truck's got 185,000 miles on it and now is 18 years old, so should probably help us out a good bit. And then we'll get to test everything out, because I'm going to use this to tow that Corsica right there, because we've got a rallycross event this weekend in Oklahoma. So we'll get to use our upgrades and see how everything changed. Let's go ahead and get started and get this lift put on. Well, the word on the street is you've got to use a spring compressor to take this thing out, and that's probably fine, but I think I'm going to see if I can disconnect a few things on the axle and just drop it down enough to get the spring out. I have a spring compressor and I could just do that, but I figured, you know what, let's see if we can try something new. So disconnected the sway bar links from the top here, so both of those are out, and I've already got the other shock out. Now we're going to get this one out. It's really easy. You need a 7/8 deep socket and extension from this side. You've got to come in through this way, and then over here this is a 13/16. Same thing on the bottom, 7/8, 13/16. We'll drop these things out, and then we're going to see if we can lower this axle down and just pull the springs out. Okay, sway bar links and shocks are disconnected. Let's see how far this thing will drop down. Okay, looks like our brake lines on top of the axle are gonna be what limits us, so bring it down a little bit and bring it back up. So these guys here, that one in particular is gonna be a little bit tight, but look at that. That spring is loose. Cool. All right, let me reposition the camera and we'll see if we can get that guy out. I don't know if the new one's going to be any taller. I haven't actually measured it yet. So let's take a look. We've got about maybe close to 1 inch or so up there. Push it back up onto the mount. Take our little cup out there. Okay, so you can at least get this one out. Let's see if the new one's gonna go in. Actually, I'm gonna set this one next to the new one. Well, it's a little bit higher, so we might be out of luck, but let's give it a shot. Got our isolator back on up there. Yeah, it looks like we're definitely going to have to use the spring compressor, or maybe disconnect some of these lines here. So let's see, this is just a breather. That one's not a big deal. I'm going to disconnect this bracket here and see if we can drop it down just enough. I think we probably can. Here's this bolt right here. It's a 13mm, and then this bracket's going to be able to wiggle around a little bit. So if you want to take out a couple of more, you probably can. You could probably take out this one here and maybe that one there. I think I'm going to go ahead and do it. Actually, you know what? There's a band around that part of the axle. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take this one out. I think we're going to get just enough relief here that we can get that out, so I'm going to give it a shot. Here you can see the old spring and the new one on the right. It is a good bit higher. The coil doesn't look any thicker, I don't think. See if we can get enough clearance here. Okay, yeah, we got plenty there. This is just a vent tube. So we've got plenty of movement there, not to be a problem. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze this guy in there. Okay, upper mount is in place. Get this little guy down here oriented the right way. I think you could do this with two people really easily. By myself, I'm going to have to push the axle down and see if I can slide this isolator in there. Whew. Just enough. Cool. All right. Now we just got to do the other side. That sucker is in with some room to spare. Take a look at this other one from a different angle. All right, this is going to give you a different perspective on the same thing. I'm going to try not to get in the camera too much so you can see what's going on. Looks like we got plenty of flex over here. Bringing that one out is no problem at all. I really don't like spring compressors. They're just kind of a pain in the butt. So if I could ever avoid using one, I'm going to. And so far, this is looking like a much better idea, in my opinion. Huh. Interesting. Oh yeah, it's much better to do it from over here instead of under the vehicle. Cool, check it out. That was a piece of cake. Let's go grab those shocks now, get them fit up, and then we can lift up the jack and get everything back in place. Time to get our rear shocks in. These Rancho part numbers are RS55262. And that's for the rear lift. Get these bottom bolts in first, and then use the jack to lift it up into place. Go ahead and get that other one in spot. Okay, we've got the bottom bolt on both shocks hooked up. Now we can raise this thing into place. This is when having an extra person would really come in handy, so you don't have to raise the vehicle with one arm. Almost there. Okay. There we go. Whew. Luckily these sway bar links feel like they're in pretty good shape. So so we shouldn't have to do anything with them. Switch it over to the other side. I'll get that hooked up and then we'll drop it down. But yeah, that is definitely the way I would do this instead of using the spring compressor. Well, especially if you don't have one. I have one, I could have used it. Well, we're up front now. We're going to go ahead and do these front lift shocks. Get them knocked out. They are pretty easy to do. So there's a couple things you want to do before you start, especially if you've got some rust. This one doesn't have any, but you want to put some penetrating fluid on the top of the shock there, because that thing can be a real pain in the butt. And we're going to take out that top bolt, and then we're going to take out that one down there. We'll start out with the top. The factory one is 15. And then you're going to need a crescent wrench that can get down pretty small to grab the very top of that there. Alright, stick that on there. And then we use the crescent wrench. And this is just a really flat side here. So crescent wrench works, or you can use vice grips or whatever else. And you'll actually see if you do the torsion bar lift, if you did around 2 inches or so, what's holding the suspension back is actually the shock. So it's got a lot of stress under it right now. I'm actually lowering the control arm down by loosening the shock. So if I wanted to do it quicker, I could just take the weight off of it. So now once this is off, this A-arm is going to hit that bump stop that I told you about in the first video. Alright, here we go. Shock is loose. Now we can come down here and do the bottom. For the bottom, we're going to use a 13/16 on the nut side. And I think I'm just going to use the crescent again on the bolt side. And then we can lift it up and over to the side, down through there. All right, I'll get the new shock ready, put the boot on, and then we'll install it here. New shock is ready to go, and I've got a jack here under the knuckle because we may need to lift it up just a little bit. Alright, so you can see this shock is the perfect length. It's not maxed out even when it's at the maximum travel of the suspension. The new nut on top of this one is going to be a 14mm. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up before I do the bottom. Okay, stick that bottom bolt in. I'm going to have to raise up the control arm a little bit. See if that's enough. Perfect. We'll just get this thing back together and then go for a test drive, let everything settle, and then we'll take some measurements of the rear and see how much lift we actually got today. Well, the lift is all finished up. I went on a drive today, about 10 miles or so, to just kind of help everything settle down before I did a final measurement. But it definitely looks a whole lot better than when we started. I don't know, I'll see if I have a picture of it and how it set originally, and I'll take another one, and if I have a beforehand picture. I'll roll them in side by side so you can see how much lift we got. I'll set the tripod here and we'll take a measurement. So if I remember, I think we were 36.5 inches from the bottom, or from the ground, and now we're at 38. So we gained 1.5 inches, which is pretty good. If I measured right the first time, it was either 36.5 or 36.25. So we either got 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 inches. So I guess my springs weren't very worn out. Yeah, 38 over there too, but it looks really good and it rides fantastic. I think the shocks were just toast, and this thing was riding pretty sloppy beforehand. You would just hit a bump and thing kind of seemed to bounce around and kind of flop all over the road. But yeah, that's it for this update. The next thing we're gonna do is brake controller for a trailer, and then we're gonna do transmission and rear end fluid in the next video.